Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Lizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Lizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Lizabeth Bachman.
Hello and welcome to Strategic Speaking for Results. I'm Lizabeth Bachman, your host. This is our regular weekly broadcast, and it is going to become a podcast episode later in the year. But I am really happy to have my dear friend and colleague, Lizabeth Wesely-Casella. So Lizabeth, welcome to Strategic Speaking for Results.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so much fun. I love speaking with you.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. You say all the right things. I really wanted to get you live right now so I can get you out here and out to the world, because we're talking today about the Great Resignation, why so many people are leaving companies. But before we do that, I want to ask you what I ask all my guests. Actually, I should introduce you first. That would be good. Here we are live, just the joys of live. The wonderful thing about Lizabeth Wesely-Casella is that she's the founder and CEO of L12 Services, which is a Washington, D.C. firm focused on internal communications and organizational development. She's a skilled strategic advisor specializing in attrition, migration, workflow management, process involvement, and culture. That's a lot of jargon, my dear. I would have to have you explain all these. Lizabeth has over 20 years experience as an administrator and policy and programming consultant. Her work has contributed to successful project outcomes in federal health policy, international program development, and nonprofit association management. And I have to say, for those of you who are watching, you have a picture. I now see a picture over your left shoulder of you meeting somebody important. I can't see who that is, but
that was President Bill Clinton, and my date for that event, who was Tony Rodham. So it was kind of a double interesting
Tony Rodham
moment.
Of the Hillary Rodham Clinton. Aha, okay, cool. Okay. And what I was going to ask you is, what's your dream interview? If you were to share the stage with someone who's no longer with us, who would it be? What would you ask them? And who should be listening?
Well, recently this really came top of mind for me, and unfortunately it's our recently deceased Betty White. I would love to share a stage with her, not just for all of the reasons that we, uplift and love her now, but I'd like to ask her about longevity and patience, not longevity in age, but longevity in patience, meaning she was part of the Hollywood crowd for a really long time, but she didn't always have the same popularity that she did toward the end of her life. There were periods where she was just an actress like everybody else, and an aging actress. So how did she keep in perspective her ability to work hard and plod at it every single day? Eventually it paid off in enormous popularity, but there were times where it must have been very quiet. So how did she keep her spirits up and know that there was a goal farther down the road, and stick with it?
Well, and for every Betty White, there's one Betty White, there's one George Burns, and there are hundreds and thousands who who had their career end at 30. Yeah, so good for her for keeping going.
Yes.
Let's go to the reason I asked you for this today, which is we are in the throes, many companies, of people leaving corporate businesses. Can you define the Great Resignation? It's a hashtag, but for those who are not familiar with it, what is the Great Resignation?
The Great Resignation really boils down to mass attrition, people leaving their jobs in large numbers. And there's almost a zeitgeist to it. There's a collective movement and a collective feeling that people are experiencing, that they're just not interested in the way that things have always been and always run. Now, the Great Resignation is excellent for me and for my firm because it gives language to the work that actually we've been doing for years. We've been doing it, we're doing it now, and we're going to keep doing it in the future, regardless of what people are calling it. But the bottom line is for organizations to have an opportunity to either keep their high caliber talent or capture high caliber talent. And what we're doing with our kind of emotional well-being in the office place and our professional development in the office place really matters right now, much more than possibly paychecks or benefits.
And actually, what I'm thinking is that for you and I, who are both consultants, what's happened is that companies and company leaders are waking up to what we've been saying and actually ready to listen.
Yes.
Because there's an economic consequence. So
there's a huge economic consequence. And if I use my crystal ball, that it's never been infallible.
Yes. Right.
The way that we're looking at this in the long term is that there is going to be an exodus, and there will be people that migrate to different jobs, but there will be a large number of people who, throw their hat in the ring into entrepreneurship. And about 18 months, 2 years from kind of that end point, whether it's now or whether it's 6 months from now, give it 2 years, a lot of those people, the vast majority of them will say, wow, entrepreneurship is way harder than I thought. I think I'd prefer a paycheck and something more stable. So the impact isn't just right now businesses losing people, it's businesses losing people, people going out on their own, and then eventually wanting to come back in some way, shape, or form. Because building your own empire, so to speak, is a different skill set than a lot of people are either trained to do or interested in keeping up for the long haul, because it is extraordinarily difficult.
Yes. Well, and when you're responsible for your paycheck, you have to be the one who's hustling. It does get old. we both know that one. How can businesses find out that they're in jeopardy before they suddenly find themselves desperately scrambling to fill a position? Because certainly replacing somebody, especially an important person, it's a lot of time and a lot of money.
It's extraordinarily expensive. If we're talking in units of 1 or units of 5 or units of 20, it gets to be terribly, terribly expensive. You're right. There are a number of different ways that organizations of any size can go about this. Some of the big businesses have really engaged their HR departments to do surveys or to do polls. Some of them have started team focus groups to find out, if there's a certain area of culture or DE&I that could be improved upon and made more robust. However, I think that there's also the opportunity for organizations who are really focused on the product or the material and don't have a lot of bandwidth to invest in this kind of research. There's the opportunity for them to bring people like me or other consultants in as an unbiased third party to talk to their teams, to not only do surveys, but to do one-on-one interviews and focus groups where people can feel free to speak and can also, use their innovation muscles to bring solutions to the table that may improve the playing field for everybody.
Let's get back to the innovation in a minute, but I want to ask you, certainly bringing in an outside person is often much easier. Do you ever find that managers and CEOs are resisting admitting that maybe they've been wrong? Or you don't want to ask people how we're doing if maybe the answer is because we hate you? How do you deal with the embarrassment quotient?
Well, you're right. It's very common for organizations to say, we're doing everything but talking to the people. We're offering to increase pay or benefits or, remote work compromises, but we just really don't want to hear from the people. And there are a number of different reasons that they're citing. Maybe it's that they don't think that the workers should be running the ship, or, any other number of reasons. But I do think that at a human level, you just nailed it. A lot of people don't want to hear that they may be the problem. The way that I get around that is just really honestly to say what we can do as an unbiased third party is find out the truth. It's more than just the complaining, or it's more than just the personality conflicts. It's finding out on a wide variety of measures, from do your people understand how decisions are made at the leadership level, to do they understand the platforms that they need to work on? Do they feel that their hours are in alignment with what's required from them? A wide variety of metrics can be gathered and boiled down in a synthesized report that say, in aggregate, 87% of your people think this or feel this way. And that's an easy way to look through and identify if your problems are, related to workflow or process or culture. Mm-hmm. And then to be able to create a priority list of what to address first and how to address it. Because really what we do in order to help create a better environment and an environment that people want to invest back in is to take the complicated and make it simple.
That's a very interesting question. Where does innovation come in?
Well, the way that I'm speaking about innovation is what we're actually known for. Our firm is very dedicated to
L12 Services.
L12 Services, thank you. Yes, L12 Services. Our focus is to solve the challenges and the problems that face the organization by leveraging the institutional knowledge of the great workers that you already have. So creating their reinvestment in the business by giving them an opportunity to solve the problems that they see on the horizon. Through the various ways that we go about doing that, we're helping those staff members create a self-confidence that allows them to begin to trust their peers and trust their leadership and trust themselves to be able to bring ideas to the fore. And at times we've had some really great moments where leadership didn't know that very quiet person who's never spoken up in a meeting actually has some great ideas, and they've gone forward to then invest in professional development and managerial development for that person, so they have a leadership path in front of them. They have a real career, not just a job. And those are the kind of happy endings that we like to see. We keep in touch with the organizations that we've worked with, just do a periodic check-in to see how everybody's doing. And those great stories really matter. They help us know that we've hit a home run.
The other day we were chatting, and you mentioned a situation where a company called you in because they had lost so many good people, and you managed to get the right people to come back. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. That was a really interesting client. The work that they did was all about immediate results because they're in pre-hospital trauma care in war zones. So we really needed to get it right away. Obviously, the people performing the jobs were under, extraordinary stress and had to be okay with, change and change on the fly. What they weren't okay with, though, was policy creation that didn't include their voice, which, that actually kind of makes sense, because if you're sitting in America creating policy, but your people are in Syria, you really can't do that effectively without getting some input. So it became a situation of toxic leadership. And when they brought us in, when leadership brought us in, I should say, it was assigned to the people who were still in place doing the work that there was some goodwill happening, that the leadership understood that there was a breakdown, and they were dedicated to finding a solution to it. So through the relationships that we developed with staff, listening, interviewing, taking action to put in place the suggestions that they've made, because that's where we see a lot of process and programs fall down, really actually putting in place what people have suggested. We helped to ameliorate the people who were currently on staff, and those staff members who'd stayed in touch with the people who had left gave an indication that the environment was changing, and those people that left knew that this was the one game in town where they could really do the work that they wanted to do, which they were incredibly dedicated to doing, and all but two of them came back to the team. So that was something we were really proud of.
That's a great story. That's a great story. Just out of curiosity, how do you deal with a case where where you've got an employee who says, well, actually, I should be running this department and we do this, and they're really not qualified?
You know, that is an unfortunate matter of when the organization's alignment is no longer in alignment with the workers' values. And we need to find out if that is a permanent state or if that is a matter of actually not getting what you need in other areas. If it's possible to find and meet the needs of that worker in other ways, maybe offering actual professional development or managerial development is the key to allowing that person to see that they have a bright future. That's one way to solve it. But there are times when the worker is no longer aligned with the vision of the organization, and it's not a good fit for anybody. Mm-hmm. I really pride myself on trying to work through those problems first, because I think that people start out their careers or invest of themselves in a job because they want it to work out. And if we can find that solution, that's the best possible outcome.
That's good. As I've been challenged on that when I talk about the work I do with helping women be heard. So from the other point of view, people who feel like they're not being heard, and various people said, well, what if they're not being heard because they're not qualified? And I just tend to assume that they're all qualified. So maybe that's just my rosy view of the world.
Well, I think you and I both come from a point of view where we are very interested in supporting the worker. We see the value of the people who do the work. If there's an advocacy side that I'm on to a certain degree, though I am about being a liaison or a translator, it would be for the worker, because oftentimes I feel like that's a very complex area, and the reason that problems bubble to the surface is because communication isn't clear, and it's often fraught with emotion. So if we can help those people, I think that's where you and I align.
Can you talk a little bit about stay interviews, which is this a different aspect of what you've already told us, but talk about calling it a stay interview. I mean, that's actually putting it out into the world that we're afraid you're going to leave.
Yeah, well, it kind of circles back to the first question, how can organizations keep their people? This is an excellent way to do it. It's a way to gauge how competitive as an organization you are, and as well to gauge where in the life cycle are your people. If you know that there are really appealing opportunities out there and you're afraid that you're going to lose your people, the information about what it will take to keep them is invaluable. I mean, it's really an important piece of the puzzle, especially if you're looking at larger teams considering leaving. It's very valuable for one individual, regardless of where they are on the scale. But if you have a very successful team and other organizations are fishing for them, you want to know about it, and you want to know how to give them the best deal in town.
How do you answer the question of, yes, we need to keep these great people, but we can't afford this extra salaries?
That's an age-old question that I'm not going to be able to answer in general. However, I can say that our findings over the last 6-7 years have been that people, their pain point for leaving for the most part isn't about money. So if an organization is doing the work or finding someone to help them do the work to really mine what the pain points are, what the challenges are, or, there's that Tylenol part. Let's look at the vitamin part. If a company is mining to find out what really jazzes their organization and makes them plumb get for any new hire, then they're finding out that it's, anything from holding their office hours in hybrid, or having different types of meetings or professional development opportunities, or maybe for cause-related organizations, it's the type of volunteering opportunities that they have external to the organization. Like, there's any number of ways to address your ecosystem that is specific to your organization, but you don't. That's why I'm not able to say it's this, because all businesses are different. They're comprised of the needs of the people that work there. And so off-the-shelf products to create these solutions, or DIY books to create these solutions, have limited use.
You mentioned the vitamin versus Tylenol. What did you mean by that?
Well, instead
Tylenol
of
is a pain reliever for our international listeners.
Oh, yes. Instead of looking at, focus groups or stay interviews or surveys, or, that type of information exchange as a way to solve a problem, you can also use that information to set up success on top of the status quo.
So these interviews you don't have to think of them as a pain reliever or a patch. They're also a vitamin or plant food, if you will, to help things grow. Fertilizer, that's the word I was looking for.
Yes, depending on how well you do them, they're one type of fertilizer or another. Really successful HR departments in businesses that are thriving right now have adapted to this preemptive information gathering. What we do touches on HR, but we predominantly support them through the training and the priority setting and the relationship development. But there is an HR aspect to this that deals with one-on-one relationships and information gathering and data point. So I want to make it really clear that there are some businesses out there that are doing this extraordinarily well right now, but there are other businesses that don't have HR departments. They're either smaller, or they're a one-person department with HR that can't touch everybody. And so we go in to help fortify that.
That's a very interesting question. In terms of, do you work at all with personality typing? So how can you understand your people better?
I'm kind of agnostic on personality typing and the various tests that are out there. We don't use anything like DISC or all those related tests. And if an organization wants to use them, that's great. It's really the tool that works for an organization. I'm not going to say, well, don't use it because we don't. But I've found that the way that we communicate with people and listen to their needs, we're in there for a shorter amount of time. So we need to be listening from all channels. I can't walk in and say, I think you're this archetype, and listen to you and communicate with you in certain ways. I need to just listen to everything that you've got and kind of come from that. The best things that I learned in kindergarten paradigm, where I'm treating you with respect. I'm listening to you. I'm not multitasking. I'm not discounting what you have to say, and I'm coming to you free from bias. My intention here is to be of service, and the best way I can do that is be completely present with you, and then put all the cogs in motion to work with you to try and find the solution.
I see. This is a very interesting question. Is there a tipping point for mass attrition? And what does it look like?
Well, I think that it looks like that point in time when the people who are interested in either changing jobs or starting their own businesses has kind of maxed out, meaning we have everybody, for the most part, gone from the business environment in corporate that we're going to lose. And then we kind of look at the landscape and see, what what it can hold, what it can withstand. Small business is the backbone of the American economy. However, we can't run only on small business. It's not as though we're in, some old English landscape where there's one baker, one candlestick maker, and one shoemaker. We have a wide variety of industries, but they're all going to be impacted, and some of them are going to be saturated with people with similar good ideas. So that competitive market is going to filter some people out, and then they'll have to go back into the corporate world. Most of them that end up going back to the corporate world, though, will be doing so voluntarily because they want that steady paycheck. They want those benefits. They want the power of somebody else, going out and doing the sales for them so they can do that specific job they're really good at.
Do you have any advice for people who are going back to corporate but feel like they are a failure because entrepreneurship didn't work out?
Oh my goodness, almost every motivational card that I have in my bookshelf over here is about just that. Just because you had a business that failed does not make you a failure. And just because the entrepreneurial lifestyle isn't for you doesn't make you a failure. I mean, Milton Hershey had something like 29 businesses before he decided to make chocolate, and he decided to make chocolate at like middle age. That's like a business every year for a really long time. The thing that I think that is the flip side of that, not just, don't have hurt feelings go on your way, but leverage what you learned while you were trying to build your own business. You learned how to network. You learned how to budget. You learned how to create a presence on social media. You learned what you're really good at and enjoy doing. Take that bundle of skills and knowledge and apply it to the next job that you get. Because quite frankly, when you have a manager that runs a department, it's like a mini business. And so when you have either the skills to perform the work or the understanding that it takes to really appreciate the work that your colleagues are doing or your peers are doing. For example, when it's budget time and you know that, Bob over here is going to be head down in the books during month X, that you can perform your work and wait until month X is done, until Bob is done. So you're not adding work on top of his time to focus. You're going to be appreciated in the business place. You're helping to build each pod or each department or each team with that added bit of experience. And so it's never lost on a person that's tried something. It's only enhanced their ability to do the next thing.
And vice versa. What you learn in corporate are where you can be good at things. Basically, it's all our experiences. I'm right now, I'm in the middle of career number 4 or 5, I think, depending on which reinvention you choose. And it's always, I find working with younger colleagues. I remember back in my opera days, when I would be working with young singers who were on the rise and they had done everything right and they believed their own press. And usually they were too busy talking to listen to me when I was the director telling them what they were supposed to do. And you had to wait until they had failed and had come back before they could actually listen. And then you become a much deeper person by using those lessons, the learning experiences, shall we say. A couple other questions for you, Lizabeth. What can you do if you are, say you're a manager and you know that a company like L12 Services would be very helpful, but your supervisor, your direct supervisors or C-level don't want to admit there might be a problem, and so they're not willing to bring you in? What kind of argument could you make to say, I really want to bring in L12 Services, maybe just for your team?
Well,
I know you've met this circumstance before.
We have worked within larger organizations, specifically in teams and pods. I found that when organizations are reluctant, sometimes it's almost the emotional versus data points. So if you have a leadership that's like all of that, touchy-feely, caring about people's stuff, we don't want to do that. Usually that means that they're more interested in data-driven information. So if you have statistics about we're losing people at this rate, or we're inefficient and our workflows aren't streamlined, therefore we're losing money at this rate. If you can use those factual parameters to have a discussion, that's when you can bring in the piece that says, these data points, they're all driven by people and their work. So we need to look at the people and their work. L12 Services works in workflow, process, and culture. Notice culture is the third one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Lizabeth Wesely-Casella, this has been so much fun to have you here. Be sure to check the podcast for Speakers Who Get Results for my earlier conversation with Lizabeth, and I will put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me on my live broadcast. How can people find you?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy talking to you, and this is my favorite subject, so thank you so much. Reaching me is really easy. I am on LinkedIn. I'm probably the only person with my name spelled this way. Lizabeth, no E at the beginning. Wesely-Casella, hyphenated and really long, and the Wesley is misspelled. It's Wesely. And our website is L12Services.com, which is L12 Services.com.
Great. I will post that in the show notes and in the comments on this live. Thank you so much, Lizabeth Wesely-Casella, for having joined me here on this live interview. I am Elizabeth Bachman, and I'll see you on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.